Hey guys, Bobby Hughes here, and I'm back with another OBS video on the F350. And in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to take your old dilapidated mirrors, and in this case, this is how the mirror came when I bought the truck. This actually right here is somebody added this on, obviously, to make, I guess, tow mirrors out of it. This is the factory little dinky mirror, and it used to be bolted up directly here, and they put this on there to get it out there further. But you can see these mirrors are pretty rough. They're kind of rusted up and just not looking good at all. And so I'm going to show you how to take it from this to this, which I feel like is a huge improvement. Plus, it's the look I was going for. And I really love these old school mirrors. They're bigger, so you don't need the big old school brackets. I didn't like those. I like this bracket design because it kind of keeps it neater and tighter to the truck, but I like the bigger mirror. And so I just repurposed this bracket and painted it the same color white as the body of the truck, so it's the same color match. And then I got these old school big mirrors to put on here, and then of course we got to have the grandpa blind spot mirror on there. But man, it looks so much better than the old truck or the old mirrors did when I got the truck. So I really like this design. Now, you don't have to use this same design. You could use this video to revamp your mirrors, and you could paint, you could leave the aluminum and just polish them up and clean them using the same process I'm going to show you. You could put the original small mirror back on there if you wanted to, but I'm going to show you guys how to put these mirrors on because I really like the way this looks with the overall style of the truck. I think just kind of, look at that. That looks really good. And it keeps it original looking, it keeps it looking cool. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing we have to do is we have to remove the mirror itself from the truck. And in this case, you're gonna be using a in this truck, it's a T30. And there's 4 bolts holding it on, just the 2 here and the 2 here. So we're just gonna take those off. Now, this door is actually broken. You can see here there's a big crack in the door, and the door is broke. And we've got a new door that we're going to put on, but we're not going to do it yet. I'm not to that point. But since I've already done that mirror over there, I'm going to go ahead and do this mirror. We're going to mount it back up to this broken door, and then whenever we get ready to replace the door, we'll just pull the mirror back off and bolt it onto our new door, so there's no problem there. Done. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to get rid of this old mirror here. So we're just going to use a couple of wrenches. Get this old mirror off of here. Alright, so now for the next step, it's up to you if you guys want to do this or not. If you're going to paint this whole thing, I would definitely recommend doing this. Excuse me. If you're not going to paint it, then and you're going to just polish it, clean it up, then you may want to just leave it the way the factory has it right now. So what I'm actually doing, because I'm painting it, I'm going to drill these out. Now the way these were designed is this bottom one should free float like this. And it's done with a rivet, with a pressed rivet, and it's got a washer in between, and that allows it to still swivel like this. And the top one has detents in it, and that's so that you can adjust the bracket itself. Now I can't get enough leverage on it because of the corrosion and stuff, but it's so that you can adjust it to different positions, but it stays locked in place. So if you just bump it, or if you catch it with the wind or whatever, then it won't spring back on you or anything like that. But I'm gonna drill them out so that I can take the whole thing apart. And then we'll put it back together with stainless steel fasteners and cinch them down really tight, and that'll keep it from moving once we get it set where we want it. So in order to drill these out, I'm going to start with a really small bit, and this is nothing more. This is actually like some kind of bolted rivet or something like that. I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to start with a smaller bit and just go ahead and drill. Now I'm not worried about drilling all the way down through here, because all we have to do is get the top part of this rivet drilled out so that the bottom, so that we can knock it out. So I'm drilling about a 1/2 inch deep, and then I'm going to go ahead and step up to a bigger bit, which is probably a 3/8 inch bit. And I'm going to go ahead and drill that now. Now the trick here is you don't want to go too deep. If you go too deep, you'll drill a 3/8 inch hole in your bracket. And you don't need a 3/8 inch hole in your bracket. I'm sorry, yes you do need a 3/8 inch hole in your bracket. So 3/8 is the biggest, but you can see you're not going to get all of the rivet out with a 3/8 inch bit. So you want to try to stay as center as possible, and we're going to drill that down a little bit deeper, and then we're going to switch to a 1/2 inch bit and try to take out some of the meat up here in the top. Now what we're going to do when we go back, before we paint all these, we're going to use carriage bolts when we put this back together again, and we'll use an impact to tighten it all up so it'll make it nice and snug. It won't spin the carriage bolt, but you'll get the appearance of a riveted top on the top of the fastener. So you'll get the appearance as though it was the factory rivet, even though it won't be. And honestly, at first I kind of second guessed myself, and I thought maybe doing the bolts and not having the square connector and having it locked in, I wouldn't like that. But it made adjusting the mirror and putting the mirror exactly where I wanted it a lot easier, because I could set it and then cinch it down with the impact and be done with it. And I put lock washers on it, so you don't have to worry about it. It's not going to go anywhere. So now we're going to use a 1/2 inch bit, and we're going to clean this, the rest of this rivet off the top here, and then we'll work on drilling the bottom one out. So you can see it's square, and so this comes up from the bottom up through there like that, and then this little deal here is square, and so that's what keeps your whole mirror bracket from actually just floating free, is it's a square peg system, so it won't spin. around it. So we need to keep this, and then we can toss all the other washers and everything else. So we're going to keep this and this out of the top, set those aside. And then before we start our finishing work, we need to get our 3/8 carriage bolts and make sure that the top of this is drilled out enough with a 1/2 bit that that carriage bolt will fit all the way down in there. So I'm going to grab my... Alright, so I've got a 3/8 carriage bolt, stainless steel. These are actually 1.5 inches, and what we ended up using were 1 inchers, but I'm going to use this as an example. So a carriage bolt has a square head on it, right? A lot like our other pieces did. So what we're going to do is first make sure that we can fit the bolt down through the hole, which with a 3/8 hole we should be able to. But you can see there's a small gap there. So what we want to do is we want to use a 1/2 inch bit and drill that down just enough so that it barely has a little bit of a gap between the bolt and the bracket. And what that'll do is when we use the impact to cinch it down, that soft aluminum, it'll kind of dig into it and it'll hold it really nice and tight for us. Perfect. See how small a gap we've got there now? So now when we put the impact on here and we cinch this down with a nut through our bracket, it'll close up the difference there in that gap and it'll make it nice and solid. So before I move on, I'm going to take my 3/8 bit and I'm just going to clean up the inside of my hole here just a little bit. Let's make it a little bit smoother. The trick here is to do all your drilling and cutting and all that stuff before you go into paint, so that way you don't take the chance of flaking your paint. Now while we're up here on the top, this front bolt is not going to be big enough for our new 3/8 bolts that we're going to be using to mount up our new mirror. So I'm going to go ahead and drill that out as well. And done. So now the top's done. Now we need to just repeat the process that we did down below, and we need to use a small bit first and drill the bottom of this rivet, and then we'll use a little bit bigger bit and just kind of cut the top of the rivet off and punch it out. Alright, so before we start sanding, we need to remove any factory clear coat from the parts that came off the truck. And so it's normal for the factory, from the original factory, it's normal for them to have put on anything aluminum like wheels or anything like that, chrome, a lot of stuff, they'll put clear coat over it, and that just keeps it protected. It keeps it from showing rust, it keeps it from a bunch of other things. But what happens is over time that clear coat turns yellow, and that's why your aluminum is turning brown or yellow or anything like that. So before we start sanding and polishing and painting, and this process will be the same whether you're going to polish these and put them back together or whether you're going to paint them. You need to get that clear coat off of there so that you can make repairs and so that you can put a good polish back on this, or in our case, paint it. So what I'm using is just regular like residential paint stripper. You can get this at Lowe's or Home Depot or any box store, big box store or hardware store. And so just a disposable brush and some paint stripper. Be sure and wear gloves because this stuff will burn if it gets on your hands. So you just want to coat the entire, all the pieces, coat it really heavy. I mean, don't be sparing with it. Coat it up really, really good with this stripper. Coat it on heavy, nice and thick. Especially in areas where it's pitted or rusted, it'll get down in there and help clean some of that stuff out. So you're just going to coat it on really thick. We're going to coat all of our parts, the aluminum stuff, the chrome stuff, everything, just in case. The chrome probably doesn't have any clear coat on it, but just to be on the safe side, It'll help take off any, it helps clean off any grime or road grime or anything like that might be built up on it too. So we're just going to coat everything really, really heavy with our stripper. All right. Now, if you've got it coated really, really well, we'll let it set for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll take our brush. We'll take a wire brush and we'll just scrape on it, and it'll take all that clear coat off, and then we'll take a water hose and rinse everything down. Alright, so in the meantime, we're going to, while our stripper's working, we're going to go ahead and clean up our other parts here. So we've got our insulators, or our bushings, that go between the body and the truck, and then, or between the body and the mirrors. We've got that little piece I told you we need to keep from the top bracket, and then we've got our bolts. Now all of these bolts should be stainless, and this piece here is probably stainless or chrome or something like that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to clean these up. I'm just going to use some degreaser and spray them down with degreaser. Spray everything down really good with some degreaser. And we're going to let that set for a few minutes or a few seconds. And then I've got some warm water here. And so you want to be really careful with these insulators. I've not found anywhere online that I can replace these. So we want to be pretty gentle with them. I'm going to use a soft wire brush, because that's going to work the best to kind of break up a lot of this stuff. But I'm going to be really, really easy so as to not break or crack one of these. Alright, so our parts have been setting for about 15 minutes now while we were cleaning the other parts. I'm going to take my wire brush, and now I'm going to pick these up and just start rubbing on them with the wire brush. I'm going to scrub the whole thing down really well with the wire brush, and that's going to take off any of the clear coat that's on here. So just, you don't have to work it real hard, and you don't have to really scrub. The stripper did most of the work. All you're doing is just using the wire brush to kind of assist in breaking it loose from everything. And you can just see, if it's got clear coat on it, you'll be able to tell when you start wire brushing it. You'll be able to see it just kind of peel off of it. Alright guys, so the next step is to, once you've got all of your clear coats stripped off of here and you're down to the raw metals, whether it's aluminum or steel or whatever it is, you can see that just by doing the clear coat, we've cleaned this, or by doing the strip or getting the clear coat off of there, we've cleaned this stuff up a whole lot. And so if you're going to polish these out, that's a good way to get a really good polish on it, is to get all of that clear coat stripped off of there. And then you can go back and start cleaning and sanding and polishing and all that stuff. But since we're painting, we're going to move into the sanding part. And so my goal is to get rid of as much of this as I can. And then also there's some damage to the side of these brackets where something's hit it or something like that. So I want to try to, I'm not going to be able to sand all that out of it, but if I can get rid of some of that high spots and the rolls and stuff like that, then that'll look much better. And a lot of that'll be hidden with the primer filler. So there's a few different ways you can tackle this. You can use things like sanding blocks, you can use plain sandpaper, or you can use a power sander. I'm going to be using a DA sander that hooks to the air compressor. If you don't have one of these and you have an air compressor, you could very easily buy one of these at, I got this one from Harbor Freight. I think I paid like $15 for it. And so it's not out of the realm to go purchase one of those, and it'll make your life a lot easier when you're doing that. Now, be sure to, when you start sanding on metal and stuff, you want to be sure to protect yourself. So I'm doing this outside and in kind of just a carport area, but you probably want to be wearing a dust mask if you care, I've had so much of this crap in my system over the years, a little bit more is not going to hurt. And so I'm going to start with 180 grit on the DA sander, and I'm going to sand all this stuff down real good, and then I'm going to go back with 400 grit and final sand it with some 400 grit. Okay? Alright guys, so we're almost ready to start painting our parts. The next step, or the first thing we need to do, depending on what you guys are doing exactly, will kind of depend on where you go from here. I am replacing my original mirrors with these bigger old school OBS tow mirrors, but I don't need these brackets obviously. I do however need this part, and I want to paint this white to match my other brackets. So I'm going to go ahead and take this part off. I'll say I am. Good gracious. They didn't want that to move. So, remove the mirror from the bracket. We don't need any of this crap because we're going to replace all that. We're going to set the mirror aside because we need to clean it up. We got to get this packing styrofoam off of there, and then we're going to polish this back to make it shine like the one that I've already put back on there. And then we still need to take this part off here. So I'm actually going to grab an impact for that. Boom. So we'll go ahead and take some sandpaper, sand this up, clean it up real good, and then we'll move on to priming. Now, if you're going to polish from this point, you're not going to be painting, then you would still go through the same process of sanding everything down, getting all the clear coat stripped off, fixing any blemishes or anything like that. But I went from 180 grit, I think, right into like 400 grit. What you would want to do is you would want to step up to 400 grit, 600 grit, and maybe even 800 grit before you start cutting with your polishing. That'll fix any imperfections in the, or most all the imperfections in the aluminum or the metal or whatever. But in this case, we're painting everything, and then I'll show you guys how to kind of restore this this mirror here in just a little bit. First, I'm going to clean this up, and then let's go ahead and get some primer shot on this stuff before we start polishing. We'll work on that while our primer's drying. Alright guys, so we're just going to start with the primer first. I'm using this Duplicolor automotive primer. It's a sandable primer, and it's a heavy primer so that it fills any scratches, light scratching or light imperfections. It'll fill it in. So for the priming part, I'm not going to hang anything up. I'm just going to lay it on this board here. I'm going to hit it. We're going to do 2 light coats of primer, and then see where we're at after 2 pretty light coats. The first coat will be really light. Second coat, I may go just a little bit heavier. If you get, the idea in the primer is to get it to bond, the new paint to bond to the old metal, and also to fill in those imperfections. So because this is a sandable primer, if we put it on a little bit heavy, the second coat, we want to get that first coat light. Second coat, if we put it on a little bit heavy, don't be afraid of getting a run or something like that in it, because we can always sand that back out of it. But for now, what we want to do is just get a real light coat on everything. I'm going to go ahead and put a light coat on pretty much everything. We'll just let it sit and let it dry. It only takes about 10 or 15 minutes between coats on the primer, and then we'll check everything, sand it, blow it all off, and then we'll get started with the paint. Alright, so everything's got about 3 coats of primer on it, and then I let that cure for a while. It doesn't take long for the primer to dry. And then, like I said, this is a sandable primer, so the primer actually fills in some of the imperfections. So after that's dried, we took some 600 grit sandpaper, smoothed everything off, cleaned up any runs or anything like that, and now we're ready to lay down our base coat. So everything I'm doing in this project is just with a rattle can, because it's easy, it's cheaper to do, there's not as much cleanup, stuff like that. Now if you don't know, what you can do is you can check, because I wanted my paint color to match the color of my truck, and you know, that way it all blends, it doesn't look off or whatever. So if you don't know, the way you find your paint color is if you open up your driver door, there'll be a sticker on the side of the door, and it'll have your VIN number and the year, the actual date of manufacture, where it was manufactured, all that good stuff, and there'll be a color code, right? And then the color code will say, let me see if I can get this to focus here. This just came from O'Reilly's, and you can see it says Oxford White, 9L, A9, YO, and YZ. Okay, so one of those codes will be your color code associated with your truck. So that's how you can match your color. And most of the Ford, GM, Dodge colors, stuff like that, the Mopar stuff, you can buy these at O'Reilly's, Advance Auto, AutoZone, wherever, any parts place, and you can match it. Now O'Reilly's, ours here, I don't know about where you're at, but O'Reilly's actually does has a paint shop now, not where they actually paint, but where they'll mix paint and stuff for you. So if you had a gun and you wanted to paint, you would use that same paint code to tell them what color you needed, and they would mix it up for you. So this one here is about empty, so I want to try to use it all up because it's cheap, but it's still not that cheap. It's about $9 a can. So I got just a little bit left in this one. My first coat here is going to be a real thin base. I'm going to stay about 8 to 10 inches away from the part, and I'm going to spray just like I would if it was a spray gun. I'm going to start before and go beyond, right? So that way I don't get bubbles in it or spatter from the can. Alright, so we're going to lay this down pretty thin. Just make sure we hit it all. And then we're going to move on to the next part. Alright, so while we wait on our base coat to tack up, we are going to go ahead and get started on restoring this mirror. Now, I don't know if I said it earlier, so I purchased these mirrors off of eBay. These are original factory mirrors. I think I gave like 20 bucks or 30 bucks maybe for the set, and they're pretty rough. They're in rough condition. The glass is pretty scratched up on it. I hate that the glass is so scratched up. It looks like somebody was probably using a ice scraper or something on them, and I hate that they're scratched up. We'll address that later. Right now I'm trying to get operational. We are going to buff the glass with a like a buffing compound, but first we're going to take care of the back here. You can see how dingy and dull this is. And what I've got here is a Porter cable buffer. These are relatively inexpensive, but not as cheap as something you'd buy at Harbor Freight. I've got a Harbor Freight side buffer as well, that I use for like cutting my cutting wheel or whatever for polishing big stuff. This one I paid a little bit more for, but this one I would feel comfortable using this one on a car or something like that. It's a little bit more detailed. You can adjust the speeds on it, which is really nice. It does a really good job. I'm just using a cheap wool bonnet on it. And this is one I've used a lot on polishing stuff that's not a big deal. And then we're using Mother's mag and aluminum polish. Now I'm just going to take a big glob of this in my hand and rub it in here, okay? And I'm going to work it around the edges. I'm going to make a big mess with it, okay? And I mean, I'm just going to coat it super, super heavy. We'll call this our scrub in. And this is going to clean off a lot of this oxidization and grime and crud and everything else. But don't be afraid to make a mess with it, because it's just a messy. So, and then we'll try to rub the excess off here and use a rag, kind of clean our hands up so we don't get it all over our buffer. All right, and then we'll just take our buffer. I'm going to run this on kind of a medium speed for now and just start working it that way. Now this initial one is more so a cleaning buff, or you know, we're not really trying to polish right now. We're trying to get rid of that oxidization. So we want to keep the buffer slow, and we want to really work that Mother's into the metal, into all the nooks and crannies. Be sure and pay attention down here, going around the edges. And we're going to spend probably 5 or 6 minutes just kind of working that Mother's into the metal. All right, I'm going to use kind of an older dirty rag here to wipe off the bulk of this. And you can see after that first pass there with the Mother's on a lower speed setting, we've removed probably 90% of the gunk and oxidization that was built up on this thing. Still a lot down there in that corner. So it works really good. This is a good step to go ahead and try to get like all this crust out of here. Try to get as much of that out of there as we can. Clean this off. And just get all that. And then we'll try to get along the edges really good too. And we'll have to do this kind of by hand to get most of this off. All right, now I'm going to go throw another coat of paint on our stuff, and we'll come back to this in just a second. All right, back for our second coat here. I'm going to take our Mother's again. We're just going to rub it in just the same way we did before. Now you'll notice this time it won't soak it up quite as much as it did the first time, because that oxidization just kind of eats it up. We're going to turn our speed up and really buff on this a little bit more. I think so. I think that's about all we're going to do on it. It's got one little dent in it right there. I didn't notice that before. But alright guys, so we've got all of our stuff painted. I didn't show the last little bit of painting and clear coating. It's the same thing over and over. But essentially we did 3 coats of the paint, and then we did one thin coat of clear coat and then one heavy coat of clear coat. We let the clear coat tack for about 15 minutes between coats, and now it's been about 3 hours since we did the clear coat, so it's definitely good to the touch. Clear coat takes about 48 hours to fully cure, and it's colder, so it'll probably take a little bit longer, but it's hardened enough now that we can put this back together, and then it can cure the rest of the way just being on the vehicle. So the first thing we're going to do is, if you remember, we pre-drilled everything out, so we don't have to worry about any of that. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and put our brackets back on the truck. So I'm using my T30. We've got our insulators, or our gaskets are painted. So we're just going to put the bottom bracket on first. Alright, and I'm going to just start them by hand. And get everything pushed up here. Now I'm going to run these in by hand instead of using the impact driver, just so that I can get the insulators and everything positioned properly so that it looks good. And I want to be super careful right now because my clear coat is not fully cured. I don't want to accidentally bump something with the impact gun and scratch something right now. So we're going to use hand tools and just snug everything up. It's already dark on me, obviously, so I'm not going to worry too much about trying to sight the mirror in tonight. I'll do that tomorrow. Let me move this slide around here a little bit so I'm not working behind it. There we go. That's probably much better for you guys. Alright, now we're going to take our top bracket and put it back together. Wish this door could be replaced right now, and we wouldn't be installing this on a bent up door, but it will come eventually. Eventually we will get it done too. So this has been a long project, not a long project, it's been an all-day project to do the one. You could probably do both of them at the same time. I wanted to go ahead and do them separately and do the one before this one, especially because I was going to be making a video. And so of course there are a few things that you will learn during the process of doing stuff to make life easier the next go around. That's the reason for making videos, is to, one, give you guys maybe you don't have any mechanical skills either, give you the courage to try it on your own. And to do something like this, I feel like is really cool because it's custom, but it's not redneck custom. You know, it's done right. It looks good. And it gives you the sense of pride knowing that, you know, it's something that you did to your own vehicle. and it's really cool. All right, those are plenty snug. All right, so once that's done, then what we want to do is start assembling our bracket back on here. Now this bracket just sits like this, so on top here and on top here. All right, so what we want to do is we're going to start with the top, and we're going to get it just semi put into place. So I'm using 1-inch stainless steel carriage bolts, okay? And you remember we already pre-drilled everything, so they should fit in here pretty nice. And we're going to take that, and then we've got this is our square spacer that was on it originally that we cleaned up. We're going to take and place it on top, and then run our bolt down through like that. And then on the upper one, I'm going to use a fender washer, a lock washer, and a nut. All stainless steel. Alright, we've got that started. Now we'll do the bottom. 1-inch carriage bolt, stainless steel. A regular stainless steel 3/8 washer. Another lock washer. These are just split lock washers. And then another nut. Now, some people will probably ask, well, Bob, why didn't you use lock nuts instead of lock washers? Lock nuts have nylon in them. That's what makes them a lock washer. And they will eventually wear out, whereas a lock washer will not, because it's metal on metal and it digs in. Now, I'm going to run over to the other side. I'm going to check my angle. I feel like this is about right. I'm just going to kind of eyeball my angle and make sure that they're about the same, because now we're not locking up with square bolts like we used to. So essentially you could position this pretty much anywhere you want it. But before we lock it down real tight, we're not too worried about it being perfect, because we can move the mirror around also. But I want to put this as close to the other side as I can to match, so that they match. Alright, about right there looks good. Now on this, I am going to use an impact to lock everything down, because it'll help pull it tight with those carriage bolts. And you can watch those carriage bolts seat down inside of that soft aluminum, which will really help lock this into place. And they may start to spin just a little bit, but they'll eventually catch, and then that'll tighten up. That's why we wanted to drill that 1/2-inch space out, so that it started most of it, and then that square on the bottom of that carriage bolt would lock in there. Now that's super tight. That's not going anywhere. That'll tear the door off before that comes loose. Alright, so now our next step is we want to put our pedestal for our mirror on, and it's going to go on just like that. So what we're going to do, and it's actually threaded in the bottom, and that's also 3/8, standard thread 3/8. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a regular washer, regular 3/8 stainless washer, and then I've got these 3/8 nylon washers. We're going to take and put that on, and then through the bottom we're going to go lock washer and regular washer, just like that. Then we'll set this up through the hole. and then set our washers down on it like that, and then get our bolts started. Now from here, everything will be done with hand tools because we don't want to slip and scratch our new finish before it fully cures. And I'm just going to snug this up. I'm not going to cinch it down yet because I want to be able to adjust the mirror. Alright, now we're ready to install the mirror. Now this mirror's got the pass-through type system. Some of them actually the rod comes up and then goes into the side of the mirror inside of here, and there's screws that kind of hold the whole assembly together. This one's not, it's on the outside. And so it's the same thing. This is threaded for a standard 3/8. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our 3/8 bolt and a stainless steel washer, and then we're going to take a smaller 3/8 nylon washer, and then we're going to pass it through the mirror like that. And then we're going to take the same combination, so nylon washer, then standard 3/8. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the lock washer. Pull that back out. So we're going to take a lock washer over the bolt. Then we're going to take a standard washer, a nylon washer, then the mirror, then a nylon washer and regular washer. And then it's kind of a hold your tongue right, get everything lined up, and then thread the bolt in. And then we're going to do the same thing. Do this by hand. And just get it snug. I'm not going to worry about getting it super tight right now. Now, tomorrow, when it's daylight, all I have to do to get all this in line is I'll get in the truck, I'll park down in the road probably because I live up in a neighborhood. So I'll park down in the road, and then I'll view the mirror, and just from inside the cab I can roll the window down and I can move it out or in, down or up depending on where it looks good to me. And then I'll come back out, snug this down. I'll have to hold it really good and tight, snug that down, and then snug that down, and then get back in, double check it, and if that looks good, then we're good to go, right? So that, guys, is how you revamp or restore or redo your mirrors on your OBS truck. Any of the OBS body styles, even the F150s, have this same kind of mount. So you could do this same project even with an F150 or any series, even some of the E-series vans. They have this same style mount of the OBS system style. And so you could paint them, you could do other colors. Remember we talked about color matching. If you had a different color other than white, you could color match the color of your vehicle, and then just put it all back together. So drilling those rivets out is probably the hardest part of the whole project, and then you can just replace it with these lock carriage bolts, and that'll lock everything in nice and tight, and it won't go anywhere. Now the only downside of this is there's no breakaway. So you know, these were designed so that if you hit something, they kind of break away in or out. But they never worked really good after, especially when it's a 25-year-old truck, because all this gets corroded and rusted up in here, and it doesn't break away properly anyway, and that's how you end up with a broken door. Trust me, I know. So anyway, yeah, that's done. Other than just adjusting the mirror, we're all wrapped up. I'm going to take and clean the mirror with some glass cleaner tomorrow after I adjust it, because I'm probably going to get my fingers all over it. But I showed you, how to do the whole thing, how to prep the metal. You could polish this out like we talked about earlier. It doesn't have to be painted. And then you could polish the mirror out if you wanted to replace it and put some of the bigger mirrors on here. Or you could restore the little mirrors and polish those. So this is a good project, just an all-around maintenance kind of update. You know, replacing hardware and fasteners, and the nylon wears out in there after 25 years. So, you know, just all of that all together, it's just a really good way to kind of update the look of your vehicle. So I hope you guys have gotten some enjoyment and some usefulness out of this video. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to leave any comments or questions down below. If there's something that you saw that you guys might have done differently, don't hesitate. Leave that in the comments below as well. Or if you have any questions about it, you know, go ahead and ask. If you found it useful or you think you might use this, go ahead and leave a thumbs up for me. Until the next video, guys, get out there, shoot some guns, be safe, and most importantly, have fun. See you guys later.